Here's the question. I'm in the middle of designing a new character. What's your top tips for character design? You know what? I got to be honest with you. I don't know that I'm qualified to really give advice on character design. I don't know that I'm great at it. I'll share some tips that I've picked up along the way from people who are better at it than I am. But my first tip, and you can see immediately by going to my comic that I needed to take my own advice when I first started Evil Inc. And that is each of your characters should have a separate and distinguishable silhouette. That's a really good piece of advice, and you can find cartoon character silhouette tests on a Google search very easily, and you'll see that a lot of your favorite character designs are distinguishable in their silhouette. In other words, you don't need to see a single piece of a detail in there without and not be able to guess who they are. It's really fascinating, and SpongeBob's a great example. SpongeBob, all of those characters, if you silhouette them, they are so distinct in their outward shape that you know exactly who they are. Looney Tunes was good at that as well. I've tried to get better at it over the years, and what happens, especially for me, where my characters are a little bit more realistic, I've got to take a kind of a page from anime and manga, and because a lot of it is going to come from hair design when you think about it, or at least that's where I've found some easy ways to distinguish people. And you wonder, well, why? Where did Goku get that wild hair design? Where if you go look at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and you'll see some amazing character design in terms of just the hair alone. And I think a lot of that has to do with that silhouette test that we keep talking about. Here's another. Now, listen, don't listen to me on this one, but I will admit to this. I often make my characters symmetrical in the middle, especially like I've got superheroes and stuff. I really like to have a symmetrical design, or especially a symmetrical icon on their chest, because that means that if I'm in a hurry and I need this image, I can flip it if it needs to be on the other side. And I can use that as a sketch to do my inking from, and kind of get a little bit further ahead. It's kind of one of my sneaky little ways of being able to do a lot of work quickly. I've noticed through the years that if I do a symmetrical character design, I can cheat a little bit. And so I don't think you should take that advice. That's probably bad advice to give, but I do it. I got to be honest, I do it. Dave Pitts says, great character design feels almost like a magic trick. I look at Schultz and Watterson and think, how did he do that? Let's talk about that. I mean, I don't know how they did it. They're playing this game at a much higher level than I am, but I do have thoughts on that. And I know this from, oh goodness, I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me because it's somebody that does a lot of kids lit books, a lot of middle grade graphic design, or middle grade graphic novels. And his work is tremendous. And he was talking to my friend Scott Kurtz one time, and he says, before he even starts to draw a book, he'll draw the characters like 100 or 200 times, just over and over and over again. He'll draw that character because what you find is, as you keep drawing that same character over and over again, a certain kind of erosion happens, a certain kind of refinement happens, and also your hand makes these happy little accidents that Bob Ross used to talk about, and the character evolves. And what happens very often with cartoonists who are kind of at the beginning of their journey is they feel that they need to keep that character on model. It's so important to keep that character on model. And there's a lot to be said for keeping a character on model, don't get me wrong, but they refuse to let their character evolve. And since they haven't done those 100 or 200 or maybe 1,000 drawings ahead of time, they're doing it live in their comic. This particularly happens in comic strips. You'll see that character eventually start to change whether that artist wants it to or not, just because it just finally starts to evolve on their drawing table. The quintessential example of this is Berkeley Breathed Bloom County. When he first introduced Opus, Opus was a penguin. He looked very different than what he did later on. That character evolved. Okay. And I guess the point I was trying to make about novice cartoonists is they don't want that evolution to happen. They feel they need to stay on model. And my point is that evolution is necessary. And if you're not going to take the time to do several hundred drawings of his characters at all different angles, all different facial expressions and body gestures and so forth, then if you don't do that beforehand, it's going to happen the same way it happens with me constantly in my comic. And that is, it's going to evolve as you keep drawing this character. I've gotten a lot looser. I've come to accept the evolution of a character much more than I did before, when I was very, very cautious about staying on model. I let the evolution happen now. And there's the storyline I'm doing right now. I had one character. I had a character design I liked an awful lot. The evolution went kind of in a bad direction, frankly. And I was looking at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I varied from what I originally had thought from this character, and now I'm gonna bring her back. And I'm okay with that. Is that good or is that bad? That's very much a subjective thing, and you could probably make a very good case for that being bad. And then maybe it is. I like it. I like my characters to be able to evolve. I want them to evolve. And I know my timing, my deadline requirements are such that I'm never going to draw this character a couple hundred times before she appears in the comic. So it's got to happen. It's got to happen there on the page. Uh, and every now and again, my readers are going to be like, well, she looks different. She looks a little bit this way, a little bit that way. And it's like, yeah, she changed. She changed. What can I tell you? And that needs to happen. I think for my work, that needs to happen. I need to have that flexibility because you can see some of the characters that have been around for a long time, like Mismatch, Lightning Lady, Captain Heroic, all of the characters that are kind of the old guard of Evil Inc. They have a very refined look now, a look that I'm very, very happy with. Desdemona is another one who's went through. If you follow me on Blue Sky, you've seen me posting this week a lot of this date in Evil Inc. history, and it goes back to when she was originally kind of a humanoid in a green costume rather than the red devil girl she is now. And she had a huge evolution and still evolves on the page. So yeah, I like my characters to change. Also, because uh, this is where it really helps to be immersed in that media that you're trying to work in. In other words, and I make it's. I'm going to tell you uh, that I make this decision based on the fact that as a reader, I didn't mind at all that Burt Breathed's character design changed as Opus developed. In fact, that made me feel like I was in on it, made me feel like I was part of it. Now, we talk about on Comic Lab podcast all the time the difference between mirror marketing and market research. And if you were to use that kind of thought in a business decision, I'd tell you that's mirror marketing. You don't want to do that. But that kind of thing in a subjective, artistic kind of idea, that's a little bit more it's a little bit more okay. In fact, I would encourage that a little bit. That goes for any platform that you're using. A lot of people ask me, well, what's the best way to excel on Patreon? What's the best way to excel on Substack? What's the best way to excel on a non-monetizable platform like Blue Sky or one of the other socials? What's the best way to do that? And other than my initial advice of kind of watch what other people are doing and see what fits for you, my advice there is to become a user. In other words, I've learned volumes about running a Patreon by becoming a Patreon backer. And I'll back people who are doing things that are very similar to me, and I'll back people who are doing very different things. Okay, and I become a backer, and I watch. I gauge my own experience. Nick Wright is a great example. I don't think he's here today, but I became a backer of his shortly after he did a consultation with me because I wanted to see what he was doing, and he gifted me with a Patreon backership, a subscription, as it were, and I started seeing how Nick was presenting his comics in that Patreon email that goes out. And I told him, I said, I picked up some great stuff in the way that he's putting it out because I am a big believer of doing the vertical scroll and making sure that your comics are formatted for the small screen. And that includes by making sure that you can present them panel by panel for whatever scroll it is. If it's a vertical scroll like on Blue Sky or a horizontal scroll like on Instagram, I like to make sure that I've got each one of my comics torn down into a panel by panel. Panel one is an image or a file, rather like a PNG file. Panel one is a PNG, panel two is a PNG, panel three. And I can get into that. Like we can get really into the weeds on that if you want, because immediately people say, well, I can't do a horizontal panel. Yeah, go and look at Evil Ink sometime. I got lots. In fact, this past couple of weeks, it's been nothing but horizontal panels. All you got to do is plan for them. You'll find that there's a creative solution to a lot of these problems that most people just throw their hands up at. But in terms of that vertical scroll, I make sure that there's a panel by panel view in the image gallery that comes along with Patreon. Well, what Nick was doing is he was doing that and he was putting it into the email. So you could just read on a vertical scroll that panel by panel comic in the email that went out. Now, for my Safe for Work version, I think that's a really good idea. I wouldn't want to do that for my NSFW one because that email can get forwarded and I lose control of the scarcity of that product, to put it in harsh terms. I lose control of who that's going out to, and I'm not comfortable with that with content that is NSFW. So I don't do it for that. But for my Safe for Work version, I've started doing that. And it's the same way that it goes out on the Substack newsletter. I make sure that on my Substack newsletter, that comic is presented in a panel by panel vertical scroll so my end user can scroll through it and read it easily on their email. I will not put a full page into that and make them pinch and zoom and all this other stuff. That's ridiculous. That's nuts. No one's going to read that. It's got to be a panel by panel vertical scroll. But I guess the upshot of that is that I picked that up by being a user. I learn all kinds of things. JC, I'm a Patreon backer at JC. I've learned tons of stuff just watching how JC posts and how I feel about that, right? So I'll back all kinds of different people on Patreon, but partially because I enjoy their content and also partially because I want to see how they're doing things and how I feel about that when it lands in my inbox. I learn all kinds of great stuff by doing that. I do that on Substack as well. I find out, how do I feel when I find out that somebody's dropped a newsletter into my inbox? I go, how do I feel about this? right? I don't say it out loud. I'm not, a nut, but I'm gauging my own response. That's how I came up. I just recently, just through being a Substack user, I started just for me. I said my newsletters are too long. I'm not interesting enough to do a newsletter that goes on and on and on. And part of that was because I was reading Substack newsletters that went on and on and on. And I'm like, I'm not reading this. This is too much. This is like a homework assignment, right? I feel crazy reading this. And I came up for me, and I shared this on Comic Lab as advice. About 500 words, I think, is good for a Substack newsletter. And I would keep myself to that because listen, I'm going to be doing a newsletter for a long, long time. I don't need to get it all in today. In fact, it's to my best interest that I parcel that out and I hold a little back, and put out something regular that's bite-sized chunk like a 500 word post is, instead of inundating them with stuff. And then what happens all the time is I don't get a newsletter from that person for the next 3 weeks because as I picture them at their keyboard saying, I don't know what else to write. I'm out of things to say. Well, yeah, you said it all on that one email that I noped out of after the 500th word, right? Right? All that stuff was lost. So my advice on Substack newsletter word counts wasn't arbitrary. It was part of my being a user and saying, I don't like about this. I don't like this. I don't like this experience. And then thinking through it, and it's not just well, I don't like this, so nobody likes it. Then I went out and looked at what some other people were doing. And I looked out how my open rates changed and how my numbers changed when I started to write shorter. It was a lot of that. Aegis says, yeah, I took that advice and split my newsletter into 2 editions. Comic in one, audio description, blah, blah, blah. Have great results, plus 10 subs. That's fantastic. The only thing I'm going to tell you, speaking of, because I follow you too, Aegis. I don't like this idea of you saying, well, this is number one, part one, and this is part two. Can we just call it one and then another and then another? Don't this half and half stuff. It's very confusing. Just put a newsletter out. It doesn't have to be this is the first half, this is the second half. 2 editions. That kind of language is gonna confuse people, especially dumb old people like me. It's going to confuse. I'm telling you, it's going to confuse people. What edition am I reading now? Just put your newsletter out. Today we're going to be talking about Scottish language. Great. Next week here's the comic I did. Great. Here's the deep. Yeah, number 7 and 7.5. Change that. I saw that. Change that. I'm telling. I'm giving you free advice. Change that. Just don't even number them. Don't even number them. What's the first thing we tell you on the Comic Lab is don't use numbers and titles. How do I know this? Because like I say all the time, I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I came out with Evil Inc. Annual Report Volume 1. Then I came out with Evil Inc. Annual Report Volume 2. And you know what? Those numbers screwed me out of so many sales at comic conventions. Because let's say I sold out of 1 and 2, but I've got 3 sitting there. Well, somebody comes up and they say, well, I'm interested in 3. Where's 1 and 2? I say, oh, we ran out of that one. But 3, the story starts clean in 3. It's got a little preamble, gets you right into what's going on with the storylines. You can buy number 3 and be on your way, and buy it. And they wouldn't. They know I need 1 and 2. Numbers, I'm telling you, unless you're doing long form comics and you need numbers like chapter 1, chapter 2, page 3, stuff like that, that's great. But what you're going to find, Egypts, is that if you write a good, compelling headline, that is going to lead to clicks better than, well, see for yourself. Egypt's number 7. Do you want to click that link? I don't. It's a snore. Now, what if you rewrote that and you said, help me out here. I just wrote a comic that I'm super proud of. Better than that. How about here's a great way to swear in Scottish and not get caught. There you go. There you go, because I know you do a lot with Scottish language. Top 10 Scottish swear words. I'm clicking that link. Do you understand? I'm not clicking Egypt's number 7 because there's nothing there to make me click. But top 10 ways to swear in Scottish, I'm clicking the hell out of out of that little link, right? So write a compelling headline. Don't sleep on that subhead either. Uh, Write something interesting there. Give me a reason to click. What do I say all the time when it comes to this stuff? Swig. Say why it's good, right? That's what your headline and your subhead should do. Also, that's going to be a lot better for you in terms of SEO than Egypt's number 7 or 7.5, right? So that's, yeah. Use them both. Use them both. Do the, give yourself lots of words. That's going to help you. That's going to help you convince that person to click that link, right? So, going back to my original thought here, this is, yeah. Egypt says the headings was just the Haverings number 7. Yeah. You see the problem there. You need to give them a reason to click, and that headline is the first thing that they're going to look at. Headline, and then the subhead or the deck head. If you're a newspaper guy like me, they call that a deck head, not a dick head like your host, a deck head like we have in newspapers. Use those words. Use those words and swig. Say why it's good. Okay. Make it compelling. Take a little time with it. There's lots of things you can do to improve that. Okay. But all of this, and I think you'll have the same. I think you will have the same experience when you want to do better in a platform. If you are an active participant in that platform, I'll be completely honest with you. This live stream I'm doing is part of that philosophy. I did live streams on TikTok for a while. I did live streams here and there. I had no real desire to do a live stream. Okay. But I wanted to experience this as a user. I wanted to see what it's like to use this format, to use this interface. In the same way now, I've seen maybe I want to do this for a little while longer, right? Maybe this is a good outreach method for the comics consultations I do over on the Webcomics Handbook on Substack. See how I snuck that in there? Maybe I want to keep doing that, right? So what did I do? Well, first thing I do is as soon as somebody has a live stream up, I'm watching that live stream, right? And I pay attention. Is there background noise? Is this happening in a place where there's a whole lot of stuff that's making it hard for me to listen? That's a good note. I got to make sure that my background is nice and secure, and I'm not uh, uh, doing this live stream in a place with lots of background noise. All that stuff I pay attention to. Jason Chatfield is a great one to watch. He's doing these live streams brilliantly. I never miss an opportunity to go in and watch Jason for a little while. And the more I participate, the more I learn about how that works. John says, I was just labeling things as comic title, chapter 1, page 4. I think that's okay, John. Like I said, with a long form, I said earlier, if in fact, I use chapter 1, page 4 too, but if I was doing that, you'll notice if you follow me on Substack, I'll do chapter and verse type of stuff in certain usages like my website. Okay. But when I'm sending it out on Substack, I've gotten much more into the habit of using those words up there to get people to click I'll give them a taste of what the subject is. Okay. So if you're saying comic title, chapter 1, page 4, as long as there's interesting words in comic title, something compelling, something to get me to pay attention, that's okay. That's okay. In fact, I do a lot of the same thing. And you'll notice I can't imagine anybody wants to look this closely at what I'm doing, but I do it a little bit different for Substack, a little bit different for Blue Sky, a little bit different for my website. And all of a little bit different for Patreon. And all of that is because each of those I've decided has a little bit different meaning behind it, a little bit different reason that I do what I do. SEO is not as important to me on Patreon. Okay. So I'm not so worried about that. I also, Patreon is mainly people who are already kind of Brad Guigar fans. That's why they're subscribed there. Uh, so I don't have to work that hard to get them interested. They're already interested. Substack is a different story. Substack is where I'm trying to get people in the door to turn them into comics fans of mine. You see the difference? So now I've got to play that in my mind. At least I'm sharing you. I don't, by the way, this could all be crap. I don't know. But this is what goes on between these ears. This is my thought of why I do it that way. And if you might find a better way to do it, but this is how I'm thinking of my own process. Melissa says I'm using episode number and fun title. Yeah, again, I I John goes, I'll have to look back at your stuff. That almost sounded like a threat, John. I'll have to look at your stuff. Uh, and what you're going to see is again, in the same way I was talking that character design, evolution. You're probably going to see a little bit of evolution there too. But yeah, that's where I'm going. And so much of what I learned there has to do with me being a user and saying, I don't like this experience very much. I got to make sure that I'm keeping that into taking that into account when I'm doing my own stuff. Uh, Erie says, do you listen to music? If so, do you switch genres based on the tone of your drawing? I got to be honest with you. I do. I listen to very, very little music. I'm kind of boring that way. I am much more likely to listen to certain podcasts. Unfortunately, I've been doing podcasts since 2007. Webcomics Weekly, I think, goes back to the beginning of the How to Make Webcomics book. When I hear people doing podcasts, I nope out very quickly if there's any long pauses between speakers, if there's a speaker who can't speak interestingly. I listen for people who can emote, people who are a little bit passionate. And if I hear a monotone or if I have a long pause between one person talking, the other one, I nope out of that podcast so fast. It's not funny. I cannot listen to it because it drives me nuts. Uh, in fact, if somebody listening here or watching this video has ever sent me a podcast, say, "Hey, Brad, I think you should listen to this." Chances are I made about 30 seconds. I can't listen to a podcast. That's why there are certain podcasts that are good, that I think are good, and I'll listen to them. None of them are on comics. Just before you ask, none of them are on comics. Because if you think I've got strongly held opinions on how to do a podcast right, you better believe that I've got strongly held opinions on doing comics a certain way. So don't listen to too many comics podcasts. I will listen to things that talk about world events and stuff like that. I'll listen to shows like Behind the Bastards. Randy Milholland, by the way, was a great guest on that several months back. That one I like listening to. I try not to get too much into true crime because I kind of have mixed feelings about that. I don't cast shade on anyone that does enjoy that. But I've got for me some mixed feelings on that. And then audiobooks. I read a tremendous amount of audiobooks. Uh, and that really is what gets me through the day. Especially if I'm inking, I can put an audiobook on and zone out and just go into a Zen state with that inking. If I'm writing, the studio has to be silent. I'll even lock the door. Psychologically, I need to be completely secure and know that nothing's gonna come in and surprise me. when I'm doing writing. I need to really, really focus. Penciling is almost as bad, and lettering. In fact, Asia Simone was one of my interns. She's now doing work for Marvel Scholastic and My Little Ponies and all kinds of neat stuff. But once upon a time, before she hit the big time, she was my intern. And we were in the smaller studio down the hall. And so she would come in and work with me in the studio. And at one point, she just looks up from her chair and says, don't you listen to anything? Don't you make a sound?" And I said, "No, no, I don't." I said, "You better bring headphones." I said, and every now and again, she would get me talking. Of course, as you imagine, it's not hard to get me talking, but she'd get me talking about different things. And so we'd chatter along that way. But no, I work in silence very much. There's no other way. And if I do listen to something, it's usually 9 chances out of 10 an audiobook. Uh, oh, and you know what, Erie, you're right. I do listen to Comic Lab. It brings me so much joy. I'm not even going to pretend. I listen to Comic Lab a lot, just to catch some of the stuff that I missed. Even and also because I think it's a damn good show. I think Dave's an absolute talent, and anyone that's lucky enough to record with him is gonna do a great show. That's my opinion. When writing dialogue, do you speak it out loud to hear what it sounds like? I know that's really popular advice. Uh, I don't. I don't. In fact, I think it's dangerous. I don't like that advice. The whole say it out loud thing. I think it's good if you are having trouble finding out emphasis and stuff like that, but a word balloon has almost nothing to do with spoken dialogue. And spoken words have nothing to do with written words. And the two are completely different in my mind. In my mind. I'll tell you what I mean, because I know I'm not making a lot of sense. Uh, for starters, a word balloon is different. I want that word balloon to, first of all, have certain breaks at at the ends of the lines that make it read gracefully inside that oval or rounded corner rectangle. If I'm using those, which I rarely do, I want it to fit inside that word balloon well. So that's the first thing that I'm looking at, as is making those line breaks correct. Now, I will then go on to make sure that it looks right. And what I mean looks right, I mean there are some words. Okay, here's a great example. Kumquat is a funny word. You can put kumquat into a spoken word line of comedy and get a big laugh. Kumquat's very funny. Kumquat's not a good visual word for a punchline, and my punchlines are visual. So if I read a line of dialogue out and I say, "Well, you're telling me fell right on his kumquat," that's a funny line spoken out loud. It's not funny written. And there's a lot of words that are like that. That is, especially words that have like hidden consonants or silent vowels and stuff like that. There's a lot of words that are funny spoken and are unfunny read. And so I don't really, for me, I don't speak words of dialogue out loud. I've got enough of a loud voice, as you might imagine, inside my head, so I don't have a lot of trouble finding emphasis words. And I'm not a big fan of people who put one or two emphasized words, and here by emphasized, I mean bolded text, right? In every word balloon, because if you're emphasizing every other word, you're not emphasizing any of the words. So an emphasis for me has to come and be used in a really specific way to really emphasize that word. And then I'll bold it and I'll also pump it up a couple of points, right? If you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly, right? But I don't do that unless it's really important to bold that word. In other words, I don't do it through habit or happenstance or routine. There's a reason if I'm bolding a word. I want you to pause on that word. I want you to hit that a little bit stronger. All right. So no, for me, for the way I work, I'm not a big fan of saying dialogue out loud for the way that I work because I'm not doing out loud comedy. I'm doing written comedy. And it's got to be presented in that word balloon differently. And it's got to have a different type of word choice than I would. And the rhythm has to be a certain way in how you read it. Jeff says, I'm trying to learn how to move from sketching to inking. Any tips on inking in CSP? I love inking for CSP. So just recently, I shared my top lesson for inking, and it's a video. This goes into stuff you almost kind of need to see a little bit, and I encourage you to do that. You might find it, Jeff, on my YouTube channel or on recently, maybe even on Substack. But what it is it's how to set up a draft layer in CSP, where I set that up as a very specific way and make sure that all of the layers there are colored layers so that any stroke I make in that layer comes out as a blue stroke or a purple stroke or a green stroke. And that's also, I set that as a draft layer. It's inside of a folder that's also marked as a draft layer. So anything that goes into that folder also becomes a draft layer. I don't have to set it separately. What this does, Jeff, is I never ever ink on my sketch layer. Because when I get to inking, that's a regular black and white layer. And when I make a stroke, it's in black. Well, I always know which layer I'm on because if I accidentally start working in the sketch layer, I get a blue stroke, and I'm like, I'm in the wrong layer. Go back up to my inking layer. That's my first tip. My second tip is this. Not too long on the Wrong Way show, I started doing a show with Dave Kellett and Kevin McShane. It's up on YouTube called The Wrong Way Show. The whole conceit is we show you the wrong way to draw your favorite cartoon characters. We have a lot of fun roasting each other and stuff. It's a pretty good show. It's neat. So, and we have a ball doing it. Recently, Kevin asked me this on the Wrong Way show as we're just sitting. We kind of chat as we're drawing. It's kind of shop talk. And he says, "How many different inking brushes do you have in CSP?" And I said, "One." He goes, "One." I've got. Kevin goes, "I got 5 or 6," and I'm like, "You don't need 5 or 6 inking brushes." What are you doing over there? Mind you, I use a lot of specialty brushes. Like I got a brush that'll make like a zipper, right? And if somebody's got a zipped up jacket, I can just go zoop, zoop, and they got the zipper. Those I use like crazy. But for regular inking, I'm telling you, if you've got your settings set right, if you've got your sensitivity set right, if you're using a good digital tablet like a Wacom, I've become recently a fan of the Huion tablet. Is it Huion or Huion? I don't know, but it cost me like a fraction of what my Wacom Cintiq did, and so I've become a big fan of theirs. And if you got your sensitivity on your digital drawing tablet set right, you shouldn't need a whole lot of different brushes. You should be able to get the job done with one brush. I don't see why people need all these. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a curmudgeon. I also kind of refuse to get that precious. It's like we're drawing lines here. We're not writing computer code or something. I uh I like to just keep that line just one, and then I don't do a whole lot of size difference either. Like that inking brush usually stays around the same size, and the variation I get by the pressure sensitivity. I don't do a whole lot with that, and if you do, that's fine. Everybody draws a little bit differently, but my point is, don't feel as if you need to get into all that. John just put down there in the chat, Frendon's Inker, nib flexible. Go to that. You know what? That might be the one I use too, John. I'll be honest with you because that looks really familiar. But go to Friendon, look up Friendon brushes. The guy does them for Photoshop and CSP. Those are great brushes. You get a whole bunch there to choose from. But my advice to you is to kind of work towards finding one, maybe two that you really, really like and learn how to get everything that you need out of that one brush. Life is too short to sit there wondering which brush you're going to use for your next line. Honest to goodness, let's get it going here. So don't be precious with it. And then the best piece of advice that I can give you is one that I've taken a couple times. One, when I decided to start drawing digitally on a Wacom Cintiq that Scott Kurtz had gifted me. And one when I decided I was going to stop using Photoshop and start using Clip Studio. And that is, and this was back when I was doing a daily comics trip. So I was doing 6 updates a week with very few, if any, breaks. On a Friday, I decided I was going to do it. And and on Monday, I worked on it through the weekend. Monday, I had done it. I worked through all of the turmoil, all of the learning curve. I just said, I'm going to do it. And then I just kept plugging away at it. Boom, 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 boom. It was a terrible weekend, but by Monday, I was off and running. So my last piece of advice to you in terms of inking in CSP is just decide you're going to do it and do it. Don't turn back. Don't say, this isn't going, I'm going to go back to Photoshop. Listen, CSP is way better than Photoshop for comics work on every score. You should not be working in Photoshop. I don't know too much about Procreate, but I'm not all that choked up about Procreate. If you're a comics artist, in my opinion, and remember, I do have strong opinions. If you're a comics artist and you're working in comics, you should be using Clip Studio. So what I want you to do is if you are a Photoshop person now or Procreate, that's great. Decide today, I'm going to be a CSP person. And then you work out all those problems that come up. You don't get to go back. In fact, I would even suggest trash it from your computer. That like if you think that you're going to chicken out, trash it from your computer and just say, okay, this is where I'm working on now. And that'll force you to solve those problems when they come up, and they will. It'll stink for the first week. And then you'll look back a month later and you go, oh my God, I'm so glad I did that. The one that did it for me was Lar D'Souza from Looking for Group. And Least I Could Do, the artist of those 2 comics. He jumped on Zoom with, I think, me and Dave and gave us both a crash course in Clip Studio. And I still am thankful that he was so generous with his time. I was off to the races after that. It was a good thing. It was a good thing. There's a topic that I wanted to talk about that we haven't even gotten to on Comic Lab yet, but I don't know whether I can do it in 10 minutes. But there is one more topic, and it's specifically about promotion, because people have some trouble understanding. Number one, they have trouble promoting themselves in general, right? They feel uncomfortable talking about themselves. And I've kind of shared those thoughts about pride and joy and stuff like that. But uh, there's a problem that comes in on the other side of this. And people who always say, well, I'm a shameless self-promoter. You got to listen to me. I'm a shameless self-promoter. I promote all the time. I'm shameless. And I think it's time that we bring a little bit of shame back into self-promotion. And I'll tell you what I mean. Self-promotion, and it comes down to good practices and bad practices. There's practices that will get you engagement and eyeballs and hopefully some people who are going to eventually become new readers. And there's some self-promotion that turns people off. Okay. And not only it'd be one thing if it's off-putting but effective, right? And I think that's the way we get a lot of spam email, right? Because it's some of it is off-putting but effective. They wouldn't they wouldn't do it if it wasn't effective. That's the sad truth. They wouldn't do it if it wasn't a little bit effective. But us independents, we have to be very, very careful about off-putting promotion. I'll give you an example because I can see you through this screen here. I've got the Substack has given me the technology. I can see a lot of you are like, this guy's not making a lot of sense right now. He's a nut. Well, here's what I'm talking about. And you're going to see it immediately. How do you feel when somebody slides into your DMs with, hey, here's my new Kickstarter. I'd love you if you'd go check it out. And here's the link in a DM. How many of you had that? Hit the heart button down there if you've had that happen and you were a little disgusted by it. I bet you I see some hearts coming up real soon. Either that or you and me as different people. But if it's a DM, for example, that somebody's there's the hearts. Thank you. Uh, that is not effective. And there you go. John Wigger just said, I unfollow those people, and a bunch more hearts showing that I've hit a bit of a nerve, right? Uh, that's because, and here's what happens, quite frankly. I'll be honest with you. If I see somebody has sent me a direct message, a DM, I feel important for a minute, right? Because it's not just a social media message or something like that. It's like, oh, somebody wants to talk to Mama Geiger's favorite eldest son, Brad, and I can't wait. Maybe it's a compliment. Maybe it's somebody who's saying that I'm the best cartoonist who ever lived. I can't wait to click on that button. It's a direct message, so it must be important. And you hit the button, and it's somebody pimping their Kickstarter. Now, now I'm disappointed because I'm no longer the favorite cartoonist of anybody. Okay. This person's just trying to sell a Kickstarter. It's even worse if I've never heard of this guy before, right? Or we're not mutual. Okay. It's even worse if it's like that. And it's because of that disappointment. And like John says, John goes, I unfollow those people. I've unfollowed a lot of people for doing stuff like that. Right. And so how do you, at this point, a lot of people who were in that first category, a little bit timid about self promotion, they're like, oh, geez, I wouldn't have thought of that. I'm just not going to do self promotion because I don't know when's good and when's bad and how are you supposed to know, and I'm not going to do it. And that's why, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. And here's where I am right now. And I think this communicates what I'm seeing here in terms of self promotion. I do spend way too much time thinking about this, but here goes. Whose house are you in? When you're considering social media, you got to ask yourself, whose house am I in? I'll give you the metaphor first. Let's say that you come over to my house and you're sitting at my table, and I happen to bring up that I'm a life insurance salesperson. And if you don't have any term insurance, it's always a good idea. Now, that may be a little bit weird, but after all, you did come over to my house. You did know that I was a life insurance salesman, and you weren't really that expected that it didn't come up at some point during the conversation, right? It's like, nah, wasn't really looking to talk about term life insurance, but I know Geiger's an insurance salesman, so I guess I'm not surprised. I was going to hear it at least once, right? Now, let's say I, the life insurance salesman, go over to somebody else's house and I'm sitting at their table and I say to one of their guests, even worse, hey, there, Jerry, how you set for term life insurance? That's very impolite. That's a whole different level of impoliteness. Not only did I go to somebody else's house and start doing this, but I'm doing it to one of their guests even. It's bad enough. It's bad I'm doing it to the host. Even worse, I'm doing it to the guest. That's impolite. Whose house are you in? And the whose house are you in uh, rule, the whose house are you in rule applies to social media. So I'm on my Blue Sky account and I am promoting my next Kickstarter. Hey, everybody, check out the Kickstarter. There's lots of great rewards, and you're going to absolutely love this new book. Here's a link. That is completely above board because I'm in my own house. I'm in my blue sky. I didn't, right? Now, if I do a DM to you, now I'm in your house because it's a DM. It's a direct message. It's not a message that I'm sending out to everybody. It's a direct message to this one person or one people, because I'm sure, there's not just one DM being sent out. There's probably some kind of bot that sends them out by the hundreds, right? Now you are absolutely impolite. You're in the wrong house for that if you're sending out a DM. Here's another one. Send out if I put a little Patreon promo on my Substack newsletter, absolutely fair. My house. My house. I got you. You're my reader. You're reading my comic. I'm going to tell you about my Patreon, and I'm going to encourage you to join us in that community. Remember, we never say support. We say join us. You know why? My house. I'm going to tell you about the comics consultations that I do here on Substack and tell you can go to the Webcomics Handbook Substack if you want to book a 30-minute consultation where I just talk to you about this stuff directly to you and answer your questions. You know why? My house. Now, here's one that people miss all the time. Let's say, and I do this all the time on Blue Sky. I post a little conversation starter. Hey, tell me about the thing that you're inking today, right? Or something silly like that, just to give people an excuse to interact and engage and come out of their shell a little bit. Because I know a lot of us cartoonists have a hard time with that. So at different times during the day on Blue Sky, I'll post a little conversation starter. And somebody, every now and again, will say, here's this thing I'm inking. It can be found on my Patreon, patreon.com/no shoes for Tuesday. That's my house you're in. That's my post. You're making a comment to my post. You're in my house. That's impolite. Not only is that impolite, but it's ineffective. In fact, in my way of thinking, it's going to have a negative effect on what you're trying to do. Here's the deal. If you come in there and start promoting in a comment in somebody else's house, you look desperate. You look thirsty. You look like somebody who I don't want to be involved with, because what are you doing coming over to these comments to do that? It would be so much more effective. And I encourage people to do this all the time. It's so much more effective promotion to come into that comment section and just say nice things, just say smart things, just say things that are happy and upbeat. And by the way, you can absolutely share your comic. Here's today's comic, or here's a panel from today's comic. Absolutely. That's 100%. And you will find, I'm very confident about this. You will find that what happens is if you post something and your art appeals to a certain other user who's looking in on those comments, they're going to go to your social media profile. Now, if you've been listening to Comic Lab and this live stream, you know how your social media profile needs to be set up. And that is, tell me who you are, tell me what you do, tell me why I should care. That between that and your pinned post, that should also serve a similar function on social media. Now you actually have a chance of grabbing that person, and they might follow you. And what's going to happen if they follow you? They're going to hear the next time you've got a Kickstarter or are promoting your Patreon, they're going to hear one of the messages that go out as part of your house. And it's going to be completely differently accepted. Do you understand the difference between my house and your house? You don't go into somebody else's house. This was something that came up not too long ago. And listen, it's a common misperception. But asking somebody somebody who has a very large number of social media followers, asking them to promote your Kickstarter or to amplify your post or something like that, that's super not in your house. And you're putting not only that, but you're doing it in a public way. What if that person looks at your Kickstarter and says, that's not my branding? I might even personally like it, that person says, but it's not my branding to promote that. It's for any number of reasons. And it doesn't even have to do with the content. Maybe it's just, one of 1,000 reasons. Now you're putting them in a really delicate position publicly where they've got to either ignore you or say very nicely, well, I'll keep a good thought for you. So many of these social promotion concepts can be cleared up very, very quickly. If you want to know what's good self-promotion, what's effective self-promotion, and what's polite and impolite. In other words, effective and ineffective promotion. Ask yourself, whose house am I in? You can do tons of effective promotion in your house. If you're in somebody else's house, you got to play it cool, like you're a guest in their house. Let's go back to that idea of the life insurance salesperson. And they really want to sell life insurance. And they're going over to somebody's house for a dinner party. Which do you think is the more effective way to do that? To make yourself an uncomfortable part of the evening by pulling each guest aside at one point during the night and say, by the way, how are you set for term life insurance? I could get you a better annuity, but did this and that. Or if that person goes over to the dinner party and he's just a delightful human being, she just goes out there and she's has happy stories to share, says witty things, is a very nice companion for the dinner party. It has all kinds of maybe compliments the person over. Oh my goodness, that's a nice tie. I always wished I had a tie like that. What if that person goes over there and just is a genuinely nice, wonderful human being? What happens when that person leaves the room? So one of the guests says, hey, Herbert over there is a hell of a nice guy. What does he do? Oh, he sells life insurance. No kidding. Now I'm interested. I don't have term life insurance. I should talk to Herbert. I'm telling you, you're going to get a whole lot better results. And again, these are the people that say, well, shameless self-promotion. There should be a little bit of shame in self-promotion, especially if you're doing it in somebody else's house. This is how you tell the difference. Okay. Uh, and it's not because I want you to feel ashamed of yourself. I want you to do effective promotion. And that promotion where you're sliding into somebody's DMs or you're sliding your Kickstarter link as somebody else's, a comment to somebody else's post, or it doesn't have to be Kickstarter, Patreon, Substack, etc., or doing all those other things that we talked about. Those are not going to be as effective as you just being a nice person when you're in somebody else's house. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen so many times where I'm just out there, just trying to be nice, just trying to be a good member of the comics community, and sharing a little thought here, sharing maybe if somebody says, "Hey, share a panel from your comic." Well, I'll pick a panel. I'll put up. Here's the panel I'm working on right now. No, no, nothing. No, hey, by the way, check it out. No, none of that. Just there it is. And what happens is later on, I find out somebody becomes a Patreon backer, and I'd say, hey, how did you find out about me? They go, oh, you were making a comment on this other guy's post, and I went and checked you out, and I got the link from the social media profile. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's effective promotion. And I'm sure the person who's a hardcore shameless self promoter is going to say, "Well, I'm telling you, it gets results. I get people coming in the door. Yeah, you do. Maybe you do. You're turning a lot of people off. I don't think. I play the long game, and I don't think you can get away with doing that on the long game. And also, not for nothing. Like I said, it's not polite. Not polite. It's off putting. It's very off putting. I would encourage you when you're doing your I would encourage you when you're doing your self promotion, and you're not sure, ask yourself whose house you're in. That's going to help you keep from making a misstep. I don't ever want you to second guess self promotion. I want you to go out there and do it 100%, but I want you to do it 100% with total confidence in the right areas where it's going to get you your most effective return on investment. That's my that's my thought. You can drop me a line and tell me what you think. Maybe that's a good metaphor. Maybe it's not. It's a rant that I'm preparing for Comic Lab, so you may be hearing that one again because it's something I do feel really strongly about. But let me know if you haven't followed me on Substack. By all means, do. You can find out about the comics consultations there. If that's not your thing, this is my book, The Webcomics Handbook. You can get it not only on Amazon, but you can get it at your local library. They can usually find it for you there, and I'm happy either way. If they don't have a copy there, ask them about it. They can get a copy. 9 chances out of 10. Okay. Hey, everybody, have a great weekend. And I have resisted working on this page. I've procrastinated as long as I could. I got to go over there and I have no idea what I'm going to do when I get there. I got to figure it out. But I procrastinated as long as I can. I got to go over there and face the blank page. I hope you all face your own blank pages with much less procrastination and timidity than I did today. But have a good weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next Friday. Bye-bye, everybody.